Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Rails Coach Podcast. This is your host, Charles Max Wood, and this week I'm going to be jumping in and talking about Rails component libraries. There are a lot of different parts to Rails that make it work. A lot of people don't really understand what a lot of them are or what they do, and so I'm just going to jump in, I'm going to run through them, and just explain some of the things that are there, and some of the details about them that you may want to know. So if you're interested in that, then by all means, stick around and we'll talk about it. Before I get started, I also want to let you know that I am starting up a membership site for Rails Coach. It's going to be the Rails Coach's first string. Basically, the idea is that your first string guys are the ones that get your best training, your most in-depth training, and so the idea is then you can go to the first string website and you can create an account and you'll get a video every week. And the videos are interesting. Here, let me pull up my notes. I made some notes on this. Basically, the idea is that each week there are typically about 4 of a given Thursday. Let's say that I recorded on Thursday. There are 4 of those in a month. So, each month I'm hoping to cover a Ruby on Rails topic, just an in general Ruby programming tip or tool. I'm planning on doing one week where I do a Rails deep dive where I basically crack open the source code on Ruby on Rails and show you how some of it works. And then the other week is going to be some related technology that I want to learn. So, for example, I've been playing with Cassandra lately, so that's probably what my first, in general technology that's related to this stuff will be. But that gives you an idea of where I'm going with this. It's a great way to support the podcast, and I really appreciate it. I also appreciate some of the reviews and stuff that I've been getting for the podcast. So by all means, if you're interested in helping out the podcast, also go to iTunes, leave a review, and things like that. Now, I'm going to jump in, and I want to talk about some of the pieces of Rails. I mean, there are a few of them that people have heard of or dealt with that they're just not. They're not familiar with, or they don't know, what it means. So I'm just going to go in and talk about them. The first one is Activemodel. If you've been doing Rails for a while and you've had to send any emails, you've most likely used a mailer. Activemodel was actually rewritten pretty drastically from Rails 2 to Rails 3. It uses a different mail library, and honestly, it's a really nice one. In the old version, you had to actually do like a deliver underscore and then the name of the email. In the new version, you actually do the mailer dot and then whatever the message is, and then you do a dot deliver. And the nice thing is that then what you can do is you can build the email, you can inspect it, you can play with it, you can figure it out, and then you can send it. Mailers are stored in app mailers, and they're pretty simple. You can kind of think of them as kind of a hybrid. Something between a model and a controller, and anyway, they accept. They basically gather the information and send it out. They just don't take a request. It's really the difference. The next piece that I want to talk about is Action Pack, and Action Pack actually has 3 parts to it. There's Action Dispatch, Action Controller, and Action View. Now, Action Controller and Action View are probably pretty straightforward as far as understanding what they do if you are familiar with Model View Controller, since Action View and Action Controller then, provide controllers and views. Action Dispatch, what it does is it actually is the piece that takes the HTTP requests in, kind of picks them apart, puts them back together, figures out which controller they should be going to, and sends it off to the controller in the action. So this is where your routes live. Action Controller is the kind of the basis for controllers, and it takes requests and request parameters, and it uses those to ask the models for data, and then it'll render a response or it'll redirect. Action View is the basis for the views, and it's the part that determines which template to use. It builds the response and uses the templates. And then that's the data that gets sent back. So that's Action View, and I know I'm running through these kind of fast, but these are these are really the basic components, and that's basically what they do. Now, I know I'm glossing over a lot of stuff, but you know, it's this, just having this general understanding will really help you if you ever decide that you need to understand what Rails is doing under the hood, because then you know where to look. Activemodel defines an interface for models. So it's not exactly, it doesn't provide the model infrastructure. Active Record does that. What it does is it just defines the interface for a model. And so the nice thing is that you can actually then define the interface on non-Active Record models or classes that aren't Active Record models, and then they'll behave like Active Record models. So then Action Controller and Action View can deal with them in the same way that they would deal with a model. Active Resource is, or Active Resource, I skipped Active Record. Active Record is also really, I think Active Record was probably one of my favorite parts of Rails when I got started. And that's the part that gives you the model infrastructure. So it manages the connections between your Rails model and your SQL database. It gives you convenient methods for accessing the data and managing the data and changing the data if you need to. And it, you know, it's just a super, it's really an awesome ORM. I really like it. And then Active Resource, and this is something that I think is probably underutilized a little bit. Active Resource is basically an API for connecting to REST, a RESTful resource out on the web. So if you connect to the resource, then you can get a response back, and this just encapsulates it so that you have convenient methods for that too, in order to hit those resources and get the data back in kind of a sane way. And then finally, you have Active Support. And Active Support really is just an extension to the Ruby programming language. It's used in Rails applications. It's used all over the place, actually. And Active Support, what it does is for things like on numbers, you can do like 5.days.ago. In Ruby, that doesn't work. There's no days method on integers, on what is it, fixed nums. However, in Rails and in other libraries that use Active Support, you can do that. And so that's just one example. There are tons and tons and tons of tricks and nice things in Active Support that you can do to clear a lot of that up. Now, if you want to know more about these libraries and what they're about, what they do, and that kind of stuff, there are actually some terrific readmes on them. If you go to the Ruby on Rails GitHub page, that's github.com/rails/rails. You'll see that there are a whole bunch of folders there. And basically those folders correspond to these libraries. And so if you use those folders to get your stuff, you know, to figure out which package you want to look at, then you can dig in. Most of the cool stuff's under lib if you want to look at the code. And there are tests on it too. I haven't really looked at the tests. But overall, you know, really, really interesting stuff. And the readmes are really good at explaining what each piece does in more detail than I just did. But I really try and keep this podcast to about 10 minutes, which means that I need to start wrapping up or I'm going to go over. So anyway, if you want to know more about Rails, go to members.railscoach.com and you can get those videos, like I said. I'm also teaching a Rails summer camp. And I've got the site up. You can sign up. Just go to teachmetocodecademy.com, click on Rails Summer Camp, and sign up. And that course starts July 26th, goes for 8 weeks. It includes at least 2 hours of video per week that you can watch, written descriptions, code samples, and a weekly Q&A webinar where you can ask me questions about Ruby and Rails, and I will answer them. So you kind of get semi one-on-one tutoring. I'm hoping not to have more than like 20 people in the course. So, you know, it's still a 20-to-1 ratio, and I figure most people taking it will just get it from the material. So anyway, that's all I've got going. So I'm going to wrap this up. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/cmaxw. And I would ask you also to go leave a review on iTunes. And thank you for listening.